Hello.
Hi there.
How are you?
I'm good. I am just sending my friend a text because I'm at her house and I'm just letting her name's Gail. Have you met Gail yet? She lives
Yeah.
in Eugene.
Yeah. I think I met her at a
Yeah,
thing.
she's a dental hygienist who does dental hygienist stuff in a spiritual, energetic way. And her son is helping me do my audiobook for my first book, You Are Psychic. So he's just like in his early 20s, and it's really cute that we can, come together and we're business partners on my audiobook. But I can only read for about 30 minutes and then I get so sleepy. I just start to fall asleep. So every time it takes me like an hour and a half to drive here, and then I only have the capacity for like 3 hours of work and then I'm done for the day. So,
Wait, are you saying that your book is really boring?
oh my God.
Because that's not a good sign if you can only read it for 30 minutes. That's not a good talking
Yeah.
point.
You know,
Selling
I,
point.
yeah, I think it's so dense that not dense and stupid, but just like so packed through of energy that I've had a lot of people say like they really like it, but they can only read it for a minute or for a page or two, and then they have to put it down and process it. So I'm kind of finding that as I'm going along here. But I'm just texting her to let her know I'm in her house in the room upstairs. And
By
then
the way,
yeah, and maybe she'll just come in and say hi, and then we could have her say hi to everybody. Just,
sure.
maybe I
We
should even text her. I'll just surprise her when she walks in.
have
So you're at
surprise.
the
You're
desk.
on the air. Do you see the chat? Like we have all these people saying hello, so I want to say hello to everybody. I'm so excited to see everybody. Um, and then we always put a chat question in there related to the show. But I'm happy if anybody puts a question in there and kind of triggers some kind of conversations and stuff. But tonight is so exciting because I love talking about the sciencey stuff and time travel and all that stuff. And Debra and I'm forced to say Debra. I want to call you
You
Debbie,
can
but
call me Debbie. No one cares.
okay. So, so
No one
Debbie,
else can. Only you.
I
Only
know.
you and my mother are the only two people who can call me
I
that.
am so honored. The problem is you decided to grow up and change your name to Debra, and you didn't write the memo so that I can like reprogram myself to say it. So, oh well.
You've
That's
only had like 40 years, but that's okay. I kind of like it.
easy with the 40 years, okay? Yeah, so we're going to talk about that, and then I think you have somebody that's going to be coming on at the very end of the show.
Yes.
So everyone should hang in because what are you going to be talking about?
Yeah, well, the same topic. Our friend Jessica Williamson, her and I participated in a research project with Dr. James Horan, who is the editor of the Journal for Scientific Exploration. And he runs the Society for Scientific Exploration. And he's been working on a time travel project where he's having different people, different researcher analyze past time travel cases and using different methods to see if how their particular method pans out with whether or not we think the person was an actual time traveler or not. And so we're going to talk about a couple of the cases, just summarize them and give our thoughts on them. So it's been a fun way to get to learn about different time traveler cases.
Yeah, and Mike, who is our guest, I'm sure he'll have a lot of input to say about that and kind of add some things. And I also want my two boys they Interstellar was like put out in the theaters again, and so I love that movie.
Yeah.
And I watched it like maybe 6 times just to kind of I wanted to I understood it on the first level, Then I understood it on the second, but like I want to go deeper and really understand. There's like this whole scene towards the end. I don't want to give it away to too many people. Oh my gosh, what is that sound?
That's
What
the
was
sound of someone. I know, that was creepy. That was the sound of someone slipping through time,
that?
looking through a dimension into our
They came
show.
through the portal. They
You
came
know
through
what?
the portal.
I was lying in bed this morning and I saw a flash of a guy with kind of these weird goggles on his eyes. And I was like, oh, that's weird. I wonder who that is. And then about 5 minutes later, I had this other flash, a vision of someone walking into my bedroom door. And it was a guy. I couldn't see him as clearly this time, but it was like someone stepped into the bedroom door. But again, this was clairvoyantly, and I have no idea what it was. But I was like, wow, I wonder if this could have something to do with the time traveler show tonight.
Yeah, I have another question, which is about, are you familiar with walk-ins?
Oh, very much so.
Okay, so I wonder, is that related to kind of traveling through time? In a way, it is, but I read a book that is supposedly true. I'm sure there's a lot of critiques on it, if it is or not. And it was about this guy in the 1920s who had narcolepsy, and he slipped into a sort of coma state, and he claims, and he was there for a year, and he claims that he was in the year 3000, and he kept a journal, and some of the things that he talked about in the journal were things that weren't even invented yet. So that was pretty interesting, and I've heard a lot of other stories about like people that walk in, so that might be interesting to talk about too.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've not ever really thought of time travelers as walk-ins, but yeah, that could be one explanation of what's happening. I mean, if their spirit is already there and then just suddenly someone enters their body, like possession in a way. And do you remember the name of that case?
This book, I have to look it up, and then I'll get back to you. I can't remember
You
the
know what
name.
else? You know what else is a little bit like time travel? Your hair back to the 80s or 90s with the Charo, you look just like her. I love it.
That's so funny. Should I get my ukulele and go, Reba! Woohoo!
I think you should. Do you have a ukulele?
I do have a ukulele, but
You
I'm not
do?
doing it. I
Oh my
do.
gosh, I didn't know that. Can you really play it?
I'm working on it. It's a work in progress. I could play a couple songs, but
Wow.
yeah, but it's yeah. It was inspired by a night of mugwort tea. So I was working on lucid dreaming, and somebody told me to have a really good lucid dream. Mugwort tea is very helpful. And so the first night I made mugwort tea, and it's very earthy. It's not the best tasting thing, but I chugged it down. I had really good dreams. And so then the next night I'm like, well, if one works, two will work better. So I stuck 2 tea bags in like this much water and guzzled it down. And I think I got high, which I've only been high once in my life. Thank
Really?
you.
From mugwort tea, it'll do that?
It made me a little out of it or something. I don't know. And so my son came home from, being out, and he's like, usually they come in and say, I'm home. So he comes in, and he comes in, and I'm like, hey. He's like, hi, Mom. I'm like, hey, I think I should be playing the ukulele. And he goes, so go play the ukulele. I go on Amazon and I bought one. And then I totally forgot about it, showed up in the mail. And then I'm like, well, I have it. I might as well start learning it.
Oh, that's really cool. Well, by the time of our next show, you have 2 weeks to practice at least one song,
One
but you
song.
have to sing too. But
Okay.
I had this incredible idea the other night. I was watching these old movies, the musical with Judy Garland, and then they were interviewing Carol Burnett. Did you used to watch the Carol Burnett show?
Oh my God, tears
So
coming out of my eyes.
yeah, they were interviewing her in between these old movies, and then she was talking about how they used to take an old movie and they would do a skit based on it, but you know, a movie that was like an hour and a half, they would do a 5-minute skit and they'd do the entire movie in 5 minutes. And so I was thinking we should do that. And I was reminded that David, your son, how he can do the entire Les Mis with all the characters, all the songs. Oh my gosh, it is the funniest thing I've ever seen. Maybe he could come on and do it on our show. And then maybe every once in a while, like he and us, and we could get some of our friends and we could put together like a 5-minute skit on, it would be great to do a musical, but I'm not going to sing. You could do the singing. I'll do like the acting in it though. But we can do it like for 5 minutes and put on a whole production. And then it'll give us something to practice and just do. And we can have like some dancing in it too, so we can get
hilarious. Okay, we'll wink, wink, wink. We'll talk about that later, okay?
No, so, really. I'm
no,
serious.
really. I know, really. We'll talk
serious.
About this. Really, I know.
We need to do this.
I know. I love you. Okay, so
bless your little soul.
Bless your little soul. You adorable thing, you. Let's bring on Mike. Poor Mike. He's sitting to our silly conversation there. There he is.
Hello. Mike. Mugwort tea. Okay. Just hold it to one.
Right. Just keep it to one. It's strong stuff, baby. Have you ever heard of it?
I'm familiar with mugwort. I've never had mugwort tea. Like I've had some reishi cocoa tea, or what's the other one that I've had with I've had some different mushroom teas, but not mugwort.
Okay. Is mugwort a mushroom? You know, I probably should have checked into it.
I thought it was. I might be wrong because
I don't know. I trusted the person. Yeah, I trusted the person that told me, so I probably should have checked into it better.
Yeah, didn't they have that on Harry Potter?
I'm not sure.
Well, okay, so tell us, how do you pronounce your last name?
Ricksecker.
Okay, Ricksecker. And why don't we just get straight into the topic? Michelle has been telling me about you for so many months now, and yeah, why don't you just tell the audience the titles of your books?
Oh, there's a billion books.
Yeah, how long do you have?
Yeah,
I've got 14 books out.
Tell us
those are the latest two. These are the first two books in the Connecting the Universe series. Travels Through Time was the first book that came out last year, which is all about the fourth dimension, time travel, and so forth. Portals to the Stars, which is the latest one, just came out here in October. That gets into stargates, connections with Atlantis, ancient Egypt, and these sorts of things. So it's really, through the series, the platform that I have is Connected Universe Portal, and really it's to show how we have all these different interconnections to the universe. And I started right at basically the base of everything, which is time, which really kind of describes our existence here. In our consciousness is in the fourth dimension, while we're in this three-dimensional space, making us multidimensional beings, which is pretty cool. But so I start from there, and then I'm working forward to really I was going to go with a book on Earth energy, which does have a section in the Portals book, but I do this yearly tour in Egypt, Stargates of Ancient Egypt, and this past year I was just inspired. We'll skip the Earth energy book. I'll come back to that. Let's get to the Stargates book.
More fun.
Yeah. And you said you have 14 books total.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and would you say they're along the same subject, or you go into other subjects with
most of them are? So I two of my books are actually mystery novels, but the other 12 deal with some sort of, whether it's supernatural, paranormal activity. I have a book on the Alaska Triangle. I have a book on shadow people. So yeah, a lot of these different kind of esoteric topics.
Yeah, those shadow people would be so great to get into, and that could probably take us in so many
Oh
different
yeah,
directions. But we'll have to have you back for that topic for
sure.
sure, because I would love to talk about that. So, yeah, maybe we could start off. Could you tell us like the most impressive and believable time travel case you've ever heard of? Like what would you say is
Oh,
your best evidence for time travel?
I mean, really, when we're talking about real time travel, it's not jumping into a DeLorean with a flux capacitor and speeding off at 88 miles per hour. And yeah, I don't think real time travel has anything to do with machinery. I think it has more to do with the consciousness and being able to will the consciousness to another point in time, because time doesn't really exist. That's just a human construct. Past, present, and future are all here concurrently. Einstein called it the black universe. I call it stacked time theory because I believe as we look at everything being here, uh, I look at it like where you're sitting right now, that every moment that has happened, is happening, and will happen are all there. Each moment, like a photograph in a giant stack of photographs. And each one of those photographs has a different frequency, a different resonant energy. And sometimes they bleed into each other, and we'll get a glimpse at another point in time and have a chance to interact with that. And so that's what we would call like a time slip. So you have some of these famous cases like the Versailles time slip. There's a incident with the famous German poet Goethe, where it's chalked up as a doppelganger incident, but it is more of a time slip, where he's walking down the road one day toward Drosselheim. And as he's walking down this road, he's lost in his thoughts. He's having an affair with a young woman in the town, and he's kind of thinking about her and the time they're going to have and that sort of thing. And all of a sudden, he notices off on the side of the road this guy in this interesting gold trimmed gray suit. Catches his attention. He turns and looks to get a better glimpse of him, and then poof, disappears. He's like, what the heck was that? Can't do anything about it. The guy totally disappeared. So kind of shrugs his shoulders and continues on. A couple of years later, he's walking down the same road again, but in the opposite direction from Drosselheim. And as he's coming across the area where he had that incident, he'd kind of forgotten about it over time. But as he's coming across that spot again, he suddenly realizes, oh my gosh, I was the guy in the gold trimmed gray suit because I'm wearing it right now. So he'd actually gotten a glimpse of himself at another point in time. Like I said, people chalk it up to a doppelganger incident, but it wasn't, some sort of spirit or entity mimicking him. It was actually himself. And the question becomes, how did that happen? How was he able to get a glimpse of himself at another point in time? When you go back to the beginning of the story, he was lost in his thoughts. He was in like a slightly meditative state. This is something we do all the time. We'll be driving down the road and we're kind of, spacing out a little bit, zoning out, and we miss our turn. We miss our exit. Oh, shoot, I got to turn back and, make the right turn. And that's kind of where he was. It's a slightly meditative state. So he was basically syncing up with his own frequency at another point in time and got a glimpse of it. So that to me is more of what real time travel is.
And so, are there other cases you can share of examples like that?
I mean, there's a lot of different ones. The famous Conjuring house, which the movie was only, like 2% correct with the story that happened there. But one of the more fascinating stories of the real story from that house, and my good friend Andrea Perrin, who's the eldest daughter that lived there for 10 years, says that this is actually like really the most significant thing that happened there. Out of all the strange things that happened in that house over that 10-year period of time, was it was just after the seance that had gone bad. So it wasn't really an exorcism that happened at that house. It was a seance had gone bad. The Warrens had come in to do their investigations. They brought some sort of medium in to do the seance. Carolyn did get taken a hold of by something, was thrown back out of her chair from the dining room to the parlor, and Roger threw the Warrens out of the house, never to return. Well, a couple weeks after this incident, and Carolyn's kind of recovering from it all, She had been sleeping. Andrea was in the parlor up late doing her homework. Carolyn gets up, comes into the parlor, and asks Andrea, well, could you reheat, the leftovers from dinner and put on a short pot of coffee and that sort of thing? And Andrea's like, yeah. She's, going to be very helpful to her mother. So she goes to do that. Carolyn sits down in the parlor, and a few minutes later, all of a sudden she sees morphing into existence in the dining room this family out of the 1700s. There's a couple of kids running around. There's a woman cooking over an open hearth, which that particular fireplace had been closed up for like the past 100 years, but there was fire ablaze and this woman cooking over it. And there are these two gentlemen sitting at a table with pewter steins, and they turn and they look right at Carolyn, and they notice her sitting there. The one kind of elbows the other and points over, says, well, would you look at that? As if Carolyn was the ghost, and all of a sudden it just dissipated away. So again, this is what we would call a type of time slip, but really it is those two moments in time just syncing up with each other for a brief moment. And I believe that if we can put ourselves into a more concentrated meditative state to be able to sync up with this and stay synced up, that we would have the ability to truly time travel. I think the only way that if we're going to try to involve some sort of technology would be maybe some sort of device that would keep that synchronization in place, to hold that frequency. But otherwise, I think it's meditation and
That's
consciousness.
really and I wanted to add also, going back in time to Art Bell days. Do you remember Andy Bishago? Did I say his name right? Bishag. Did you ever hear of him? Andy Bishago, where he had those pictures about, I think it was like in the 1920s or something, and it's a little kid wearing like Nike shoes or something. And do you know what I'm
there's
talking
a lot of those sorts of, there's a lot of the sorts of those photos. I do cover some of the photos in my book, Travels Through Time. And some of them are interesting. Some of them are seemingly out of place, but can be explained away. There's like the time traveling hipster where, he's wearing clothes and, has a camera and the sunglasses and everything that's a little bit out of place, although you can actually place some of those objects in that time, but he would have to be like really like on top of his game to have had everything. So there's stuff like that are interesting, and it's hard to know. I mean, you have people coming back and say, hey, look at this, photos from like the 1860s or whatever. That's me. And you're looking at it and it's like it's blurry. It could really be like anybody. So
there's so many people who look alike, so it really is hard to say.
There's
I'll give you an example of people looking alike, especially like within families. So about, oh my gosh, it was probably a good 15 years ago now. My mother hands me this photo and asks, who is this in this photo? And I'm looking at it and I'm like, this is my son Chase, but he was never in this situation. It was a boy that looked exactly like my son. He's in a suit and he's next to a little table, and it's got some flowers on there and everything. And I'm like, I don't recognize where this is at all, but that's Chase. He's like, and she says, that's not Chase. That's your father at his first communion. I'm like, oh my God.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was uncanny. Yeah.
That is cool. Yeah. So when I want to go back to the device idea, because that like triggered a thought to me. Sure. I remember the God helmet. Do you remember that by Dr. Pershinger? Was that his name?
Okay, the name sounds familiar, but okay, the God helmet. Okay.
Yeah, and so that sounds like it would be something that I like what you're saying, and it makes sense to me that something, because I know they talk about like traveling through a wormhole. The thing that would stop us is the problem is that it would collapse, and that they need something that would keep it open.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So I'm associating that idea with kind of what you're talking about, because I'm also thinking about traveling through time being like like in individual wormholes, like personal wormholes, and that you would have this this device that keeps that space open.
Yeah. That's the trick is keeping those frequencies consistent, because things are moving, they're vibrating, so they're changing from moment to moment. Yeah.
So just to go back, because some people may not know what the God helmet is. So Persinger came up with this device that basically it looks kind of like a mixture between like a bike helmet and a EEG contraption. And the idea was that they would bring people into a Gansfeld type setup, a Faraday cage, and then they would tell them that this was a special device that would help them connect up with God, their higher power, and that there was something about the helmet itself that would do this. But in actuality, they were kind of testing like a placebo effect, because there wasn't anything special about the helmet, but all sorts of experiences were reported by many people. Like some of them said it was like the most incredible experience they ever had. And the thought was, it's not just like they're just like making this stuff up. It's the idea that because they believed it, they connected with a higher energy or changed their vibration, and then they had this new experience. So that is a really interesting idea, that people like kind of ground the energy through some kind of object like that, and then they could go through time. But
Yeah, because with something like that, I mean, even if the helmet itself doesn't really work, you're setting that intention, you're setting that vibration to be able to access these things. So yeah, I mean, we see all kinds of cases where people, truly believe something and they're able to make things happen. So yeah.
well, and it was interesting with that one case where it sounded like people may sometimes mistake poltergeist activity for, they think it's spirits, but it might actually be time travelers. How often do you think that's the case?
I mean, it can explain a lot of different things, and I'm not going to sit here and say, all these cases of hauntings, poltergeist activity, and whatever are time travelers or some type of time travel incident. They can be. You have to kind of look at each case individually to try to figure out what exactly it is, because you do have a lot of cases, and I've been on them, the poltergeist cases, where they believe that the house is haunted, and we're in there, and you're discovering that the teenage daughter has some extra ability. She's acting out and is physically manifesting itself in the house, which that's not a time travel incident either. That's something connected to her. So you really have to take each case individually. But some of these things that we might call a haunting could actually be a case of time travel. And there's times where, because I spent a number of years as a paranormal investigator, and some of these locations that we would go to, I'll use an example here, Johnny V's in Muskogee, Oklahoma. We're really just finishing up the investigation. I decided to do a last photo sweep of the building, and there were a couple guys up in the upper loft bar area. A couple of people were out in the front restaurant area. I'm walking through the main kitchen door, and as I'm walking through, all of a sudden there is this wisp of a shadow that just darted right by and slammed into the side kitchen door. You just heard this boom. But this door, which was just a little flimsy metal door, something you could kind of like tap your finger and the thing would move, something that waiters and waitresses would use to carry large trays of food. This thing didn't move at all, but you heard that bang. It's like, what the heck was that? And I called out, hey, did you guys hear that? You're like, yeah, we heard that. And I'm kind of explaining what happened. Then I'm thinking for a second, oh, maybe these guys are playing a trick on me. Maybe I threw something at the door or whatever. And I'm asking, did you guys throw something at the door? No, because they're in their conversations. I even walk outside this door. I'm looking at the ground. I didn't throw anything. So I have to ask myself, what exactly did I see and witness? So here's what I believe is that when I walked through that door, somebody or something was there. I scared it because that thing took off running. But I believe it was either in some other dimension or some other point in time, in that when it slammed into that door in its other dimension or point in time, that door flew wide open and he or she ran right through that door. Sound works on a different wavelength. And I was able to hear that over through time or through the dimensions but I couldn't see it. So so I believe that happened. And just kind of thinking back to it, it's like, okay, if this was something from another point in time that I was interacting here for a brief moment, we were there on a paranormal investigation because this place was supposed to be haunted. If I interacted with somebody in the past in that moment, were we investigating that particular night because of this haunting that was reported, say, in 1980 or 1970 or whatever? Are we the reason the place was considered haunted? So you have this like circular paradox here. Yeah.
That's, essentially you're the ghost haunting the
I was their ghost. Yeah.
Wow. I have a couple examples. When I was a kid and teenager, I was always really scared of basements, and our laundry was down there, and I was home alone one day, and I had this routine where I'd go to the laundry, I'd be okay, I'd talk myself into everything's okay, and then I'd get freaked out and I would run up the stairs. Well, one day that happened, and I ran up the basement stairs and went into the kitchen. And about 10 seconds later, I heard someone run up the stairs just like I did. Like the feet, you could hear it the whole time. And like I panicked, and there was a door to the staircase, and I ran over and I locked the door. But it was so loud. And I was like, what the heck was that? It sounded like me, but no one else was home. And then another time I was dating a guy that took care of a racquetball fitness center. There were all these different racquetball courts. And at night, I went in there a couple times, and we're standing like in the hallway, and I'm hearing in the different rooms people playing racquetball, like the sound of the ball bouncing off of the rooms. And he was like, oh yeah, that happens all the time. And we went to like each one, because from upstairs you could look down in the room. No one was there. We were the only two people in the whole place, but you could hear it constantly. And I didn't know, like, can sound be trapped? And it's just like, have you ever heard of that? Or was that the pass sound of the balls, or like, what was that?
Yeah, in a lot of these cases, kind of like what you're describing at first there. I mean, it's not even necessarily the sound. The Norse mythology had this idea of what they called a vartiger, and so it's again kind of a doppelganger sort of incident where you're sitting in the room, somebody walks in and walks back out, and then all of a sudden there they are again, the exact same thing. So it's kind of like a time displacement where it's just like it's a little bit offset, and you're getting kind of this repeat thing happen again and again. It's because all time is concurrent, it's all here. And so we're getting these other moments in time to play out. There's something about many of these areas that are more prone to this sort of thing happening, where all of a sudden you'll get a playback or something. Or it's not really even a playback, that would be more like stone tape theory, but you're just able to tune into these other moments a little bit better than some other areas in the universe. And I think that in part has to do with energy at particular locations.
Yeah. So can you tell us, like, what are some of just really like the most astounding, like, incidents that you've experienced in your life? Like, would you say that you've experienced what could be considered time travel, apart from what you've already shared?
Yeah. I mean, that one there that I was talking about, Johnny V's, that was really interesting. So my fiance Jennifer and I, we've known each other since we were in first grade, and when we were in the library one day at the school, we didn't really hang out or anything in first grade, but all of a sudden, I'm just there at one of the stacks in the library. I'm looking through the books, and she just comes like right up next to me and lays a kiss on my cheek. And I'm like, whoa, what the heck was that? I'm just kind of flushing red.
You.
I know, right? Well, it's not like we suddenly started dating, for the next 45 years or whatever. But Yeah. And so it's, I had a little crush on somebody else and whatever. This was like totally out of the blue.
So
We,
cute.
yeah, it was. Yeah. So yeah, she didn't become my little girlfriend. It was just like a one-off incident. It was like, what in the world? So we were in 4th grade together. We were in 7th grade together. We actually kind of quote unquote at 12 years old went out for a month. I was too scared to hold her hand at that point, so she broke up with me. and then I moved away in 8th grade, and we didn't have any contact with each other for like 21 years until social media and all that stuff comes around. And so we reconnect, and I was married at the time. She was with somebody, and we're just kind of like catching up. And every once in a while, our paths will cross. We go out for dinner and catch up with that sort of thing. And I'd asked her at one point, what the heck was the kiss in the library in 1st grade? And she was just kind of like, I don't know. Something told me to kiss your cheek, and I did. So I was like, okay.
This is
So yeah. So years later, I was hosting a tour in Ireland. We were both single at the time, and on this tour, we just hit it off and we got together. So about a month after the tour, we decided to go back to this town that we lived at in Massachusetts and visit our old haunts. And so we went back to that school, which is it's part of the university there now, and they use it as a performing arts center. So we're walking around the premises, looking in windows and things like that, looking at our old classrooms. We get back to the library, and it's now being used as like a little music room or something. And we're kind of pointing out, oh, that's where it happened. It's like we're looking through the window. And all of a sudden, Jennifer starts yelling through the window, kiss him. And, we're laughing and thinking it's funny.
Keep it G-rated here. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. But as we were driving away, it was like, wait a minute. Jennifer had said that something had told her to kiss me. So was it her 40-something-year-old self calling back time to tell her to kiss my cheek? Yeah.
Wow.
That is the best. Oh, I love that story.
That is so cool.
I love it.
That's so interesting. Like, it seems like we could set up some experiments like that. Like I'm not sure what exactly, but it seems like we can do that. Well, I know for sure that, like, before I published my first book, I used to visualize my books on the bookshelf at the store, and I would send messages to myself standing next to my book, and I would do that constantly. And then when it actually did come out and it was in the stores, I would go there and then like take pictures of myself next to it, or I'd move it into the bestseller area because it wasn't getting there by itself. And I really did feel like I helped manifest that, because I kept sending these messages back to myself, forward and backwards. And I know Michelle does this with her hypnosis. So yeah, what I know we don't have a lot of time, and there's just so much that we could talk about. What is your favorite topic to talk about when it comes to time travel? Like, what do you think is the coolest thing about time travel and this whole subject?
Yeah, something that's really cool to me about all of this, I call it, so something I call eternal knowledge. You're going to have other terms for it, like the collective unconscious or the Akashic records and that sort of thing. Basically, if all time is here, ever present, past, present, future, from the beginning of the universe to the end of it, then everything that will ever be accomplished and known in the universe is here right now. So when, some of these, when we get some of these kind of eureka moments or whatever, we are getting ideas that are like, where the heck did that come from? It's an idea that is all that's ever present. You look at somebody like Nikola Tesla, how far ahead he was in time. Well, this is a guy that, as a younger man, he was practicing astral projection and things like this. He was really in tune with the universe, and he had that open mind that, let me download the information. He was doing thoughts experiments like Einstein was. So he was tapping into this knowledge that is out there in the universe that is available to all of us. And that's why he was coming up with these ideas that were so far ahead of his time, like having the knowledge of the universe inside in a device that can fit in your pocket. Well, that's our cell phone these days. I mean, it's not all stored on the phone, but we can access it. He had concepts of artificial intelligence, back in the late 1800s, when he actually developed the first real drone. And then he started talking about how he could basically put artificial intelligence inside that. And he said, I could build, he called it a teletomaton. He was like, I could build a teletomaton of myself, make it look like me, act like me, make decisions like me. It's talking about this, 100 years ahead of, any sort of time that we had this. And his thought, though, back then was just, using gears and wheels and things like this. He didn't know that it was in radio waves. He didn't know that was going to be a silicon microchip that was invented after he had passed, but the ideas were already there. So, that's a really interesting aspect to me, that, all these things that are going to happen, if, as we are kind of in this river of time, they're actually already there. So we can grab them and implement them in our lives right now.
Yeah, that's so cool. I know Michelle wants to say something. Can I just say one thing and I'll shut up?
No, you don't have to shut up, but I do need to say something before I
Okay,
fall
go
off.
ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So I had after your story, I had the perfect transition to ask another question, and then we kind of veered off. So we're going to go back in time.
Let's do it.
You just finished your story, and I'm going to say, I wrote it down so I don't forget. Since one of the messages in the movie Interstellar is about love transcends time. Yeah. I wanted to talk about Interstellar and that whole idea of the Tesseract and all that. Like, what the heck?
Yeah, and I am going to go catch Interstellar over lunch tomorrow. So that'd be fun. Yeah, the Tesseract. So basically, this is the idea of building and I like the way that they depicted it in Interstellar, because when you look at a drawing online of a quote unquote Tesseract, basically trying to put another physical dimension on top of our 3 dimensions, they basically put like a cube on top of a cube, which is really, to me, heavy-handed. I don't think we quite understand what that is going to look like, but yeah, the way they do that in Interstellar is they still in some ways have a callback to that, because they make everything her room is a cube, right? And so they have all of these kind of cubes stacked on each other, and he has to find that right moment. It's every moment of his daughter's bedroom, and he can't quite find what that right moment is to be able to deliver messages back. So he's essentially in this scenario, he's actually, in the beings that are having him do this are in a 5th dimension. They have him in this 4th dimensional Tesseract looking down into her 3-dimensional bedroom. So you have all of these layers of dimensions, and that's something that when we look at how time travel would really work, we have to look at how the dimensions actually work. And we have, according to our current theoretical physics, up to 11 hyperspatial dimensions, 0 to 11. So 0 is a point. That one's actually controversial. The physicists argue about that one. The first dimension is a line. Second dimension is a plane. Third dimension is just 3D. Where'd I go?
It should fix. Just keep
slipped,
talking.
You slipped into another dimension again.
We can hear you. Are you still there? Oh
my gosh. He went forward in time. I think he's in the future right now.
Yeah, he went to figure stuff out. He'll be on in 1 second.
Yeah, then he could tell us something
Producer
about
Adam, are you there?
We'll get him back in a couple of minutes, I'm sure. But we're constantly looking at what's going to happen in the future, right? Like we're going to have a on our show sometime around maybe even on New Year's Eve or day. We're going to do a special where we make New Year's predictions. But beyond like actually, trying to see like a specific date, I think it's so cool. Like if we just intuitively tune in, and it's not that we have to like try to, I mean, we could do like a formal remote viewing session, or just like, I think if you constantly try to psychically tune into your future to get information about it, opening up that portal for it to come in, then you're likely to really be assisted by that information. And so this is just inspiring me to start doing that more. I think it'd be a cool exercise, like even before you go to bed or when you wake up, when you're in that most deepest theta state, to really connect with your future self and say, even if you don't tell me something I could see or hear, like just infuse me with the knowledge of what I'm going to be creating. Do you ever do that, Michelle?
I in personal things, I've come to the conclusion that there's two things going on. When I plan something that's about to happen and I do everything, I run scenarios in my mind and I go through this and that, the whole thing, nothing ever goes the way I planned it. So I have that side where, like,
but that's like your logic
doing it right. But then if I predict something, then it may or may not happen. It's kind of like it maybe boosts the odds a little bit because you're tapping into this kind of stream of whatever.
Right.
So yeah.
But that's also like, where you're seeking exact information or details, but it may just be, if you immerse yourself in that future information, even if like in the moment, you don't have realizations, but you just connect with that future information or vibe, like it'll sink in on a subconscious level, on a body level, and then you may be more inclined to take the right action to lead you, to the future that you want. And now we're wondering, did you slip into the future or did you slip into the past, Mike, when you were gone?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I got stuck in the time warp.
So you were talking about like the different types of dimensions, and I had a question about that. Like how are these just theories, or has someone proven like these other dimensions? Can you start to go through like what's one dimensional and two dimensional, and do we know this for sure beyond the third dimension in terms of science today?
I think there's a little delay. Big delay. Camera frozen.
Now he's frozen in time.
Yeah.
He's frozen in time. What do we do to bring him back?
Everybody, clap your hands if you believe it.
It's working. It's working.
It's working.
Keep clapping your hands.
Clapping your hands.
We'll bring him back.
Tinkerbell. Clap your hands.
What dimension is he in? Well, how about, do we have some people with questions in our audience?
Oh, there's so many. There's a lot going on here.
Let's see what they have to say.
Okay.
And I know he's better at answering these questions than we are, but we could play what would Mike say, and then
we'll just kind of make it up. Okay, we'll just sound really
let's pretend we're time travel experts. Okay, first question. Yeah. Michelle, I can't see the chat. Can you?
Yes. Okay. It should be on your screen.
No, I don't have it. So, maybe it's in a time warp, but oh, here we go. Okay. Here we go. Sorry. Let's see. Does anyone have a question about time travel?
We've had some comments that were interesting.
It looks like Rose had some things to say here. She's talking about a river of time, intersecting rivers of timelines. And then she says, I would think that if you're a being existing in a higher dimension, you would have parts of your physicality that are integrated in the higher dimension. It would be easier to look down than up. Wow, that's pretty interesting. She goes on to say it would be easier to look down into the lower dimensions and increasingly difficult to see into the higher dimensions, just as we experience.
Okay, he's back.
Okay, hopefully
Yay.
we're okay now. So that comment there from Rose, that's what I was trying to get to and what I was explaining. As I was going 1, 2, 3, our consciousness is in the 4th dimension. Okay, and that's the dimension that we call time. Again, time doesn't really exist, but that's the name that we've given it. The other dimensions above us, 5, 6, 7, 8, and onward, our physics has shown that they exist. But we don't have the physical geometry to really get there. So, yeah, like Rose was saying, we have access to everything below us, 3, 2, 1, and 0. But to go above that becomes much, much more difficult. But we may be seeing things from those other dimensions kind of float in and around our own. So there's a great example of it's called flatland. Okay,
I was
basically,
just going to say that.
yeah,
I was
it's
just
a
going to say that.
two-dimensional world. It's a two-dimensional world. Everything is just like triangles, squares, circles, that sort of thing. But if you were to drop a sphere into flatland on a two-dimensional plane, they would never really see or understand the whole sphere. What they would see as you dropped it into their world, they would see like a small circle start to open and expand outward. And then as it continued to pass through, then it would close back up until it passed all the way through. So they would see this, what is this weird circle that's suddenly appearing here, without the concept of the higher dimension of the full object. And so when we see some of these different things, and it could be like some of these UAPs that we're seeing, some of these objects in the sky, some of these things that we're calling, ghosts or supernatural activity, these could be things on a higher dimensional plane that are just suddenly kind of slipping into our dimension for a moment. We're getting a glimpse of them, not understanding it fully, and then it slips right back out.
Yeah.
And,
Wow.
and when you say that physicists have proven these other dimensions, how did they do that?
Math.
So just mathematically, they.
I mean, you could do a lot of research into like the particulars. You could read like Michio Kaku. You could read some Einstein, Niels Bohr. I mean, all those guys. You could dive into their work on that. So,
Yeah,
but Michio, I like Michio's work because in his books, he kind of like breaks everything, even though there's a lot of science in it, it's pretty dense. He throws a lot of pop culture into the mix too, which I tried to do with Travels Through Time, because then you can kind of get an idea from our science fiction and things like that. Oh, this is what he's referring to here when he's trying to break down how the dimensions work. But yeah, anything that's like 5th dimension and up would be outside the scope of time.
Right.
So they would have access to it, and that's what they were showing there in Interstellar.
Well,
Yeah.
what about just like with our imagination? Like if I have this glass, like I'm touching it like 3-dimensionally, but my mind can go through the glass and look at what's inside at the same time, and then I can smell it and taste it. Like maybe all of that is like that's multidimensional, right? Because I'm not confined. My mind's not confined to just 3-dimensional.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference there between your mind and your consciousness. So when you're smelling whatever it is in there, those are the senses of your 3-dimensional body. Your 4th dimensional consciousness is inside your body. When the 3D body passes away, your consciousness is still around. And there's actually scientists now, Stuart Hameroff, Robert Penrose, a lot of their work that they're doing, in their assessment, they believe that the consciousness resides in the microtubules in the brain. Maybe not, but that's their idea. Of course, then when they're asked, okay, so what happens when the body dies? And these are guys that are like Penrose has said, well, spiritually, I'm an atheist, but the consciousness goes somewhere off to the cosmos. I couldn't tell you where, but it goes somewhere. So I think that's why we have, like, a lot of times what we might call a ghost or a spirit. 3D body passes away. The fourth dimensional consciousness is still here, maybe by choice. Like, I know my grandfather was here for a few years waiting for my grandmother to pass. And then when she passed, they went off. And that's the big question. Where do they go? Is it one of those other dimensions, or is it something even further beyond yet that we haven't quite understood yet?
Yeah. Well, and Michelle was talking earlier about walk-ins, and I was just thinking about when people have had experiences of shape shifting.
Mhm.
Every once in a while, I talk to someone where they swear up and down that they were like with somebody, and as they were like physically there with the person, their face like shifted into like, like a young girl's face, and then an old lady's face,
Mhm.
and then an alien face. And they're like, I wasn't just imagining it, it like majorly changed. So, what's happening there is it, what do you think is happening with shape shifting?
Yeah, I mean, those are um so I guess we kind of have to ask ourselves, is that happening, the shifting, is that happening here on the third dimensional plane, or is it something else from another dimension that is coming into ours, and it gets distorted along the way? Like, maybe they're trying to hold some sort of image for us to be able to, grasp their bodily existence, and maybe they're having challenges in holding that, and that's why it shifts. Yeah, I mean, we honestly truly don't know, so it's something we do have to speculate on, but it might be something along those lines.
I have the book now about, because you brought up the walk-ins again. This is the book I was talking about. I highly recommend it. It's
Okay.
written like a journal, and it, to me, I don't know, it feels like it's plausible
Is
in a
it
weird way. In a
is
weird
it
way.
fiction or not fiction? I mean, is
No,
it,
it's
and is
real. Yeah. No, it's kind of, it's written like a
Right.
journal entry. And he talks about how the society is in the year 3000, and um, you know, just everything is so different. Like, they don't use money, and people work up until a certain age, and then they retire, and then the next group work. Like, the whole world is very different. So even if it's a fake book, which I don't think it is, then it's very interesting. In fact, I think that I'd like to grab someone to make a movie out of this book. So I'm gonna, yeah, I have
well,
to talk to a few people and see if they'd be willing to do that. But it's very interesting.
is the author still around?
No, because
No, that's I'm familiar with that book.
well, you
I haven't
are.
sat down to read it all, but I'm familiar with kind of the basic premise of it. And yeah, it's one of those that, because it's so far in the future, we're not going to know until we get there. So we'll see how it'll be interesting to see how much stuff lines up over time. It's the details that are going to matter and something like that, because a lot of the generalities, you could essentially write a book of the future of humanity, because humans go in these cycles all
Right.
the time. We're always repeating the same mistakes. We're always doing the same things, and not just short term, but over long periods of time too. So yeah, you could make some general assessments about the rise and fall of different countries and empires and things like that. Well, those things are going to happen, but it's going to be the fine details. Yeah, when he's talking about, we're not using currency anymore, we're doing, some of these other things. Those would be the interesting details to see if those
Yeah.
actually do come true. Yeah.
It's a good read anyway. But so we are coming up to the hour, and ask everybody to stick around to talk about the research that Debra and her friend and Jessica, which she will be joining us shortly. But Mike, thank you so much. I know you are like so busy, and you took the time to come and help us out with our show and answer some of our questions. And
Absolutely.
sometime in the future, I would love to have you back and talk about all the other things.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
recommend people like support Mike. He's got a talk. Are you still doing your show? He has.
Yeah. Tomorrow, connecting the universe. It's our Edge of the Rabbit Hole week. So that's once a month we have a special Edge of the Rabbit Hole episode. Bring on some guests, and so tomorrow night bringing on Ronnie LeBlanc and Scott Davis to talk about
Nice.
the New Jersey drones, which
Oh
apparently
my
is
gosh.
even more widespread now.
I was just gonna interrupt and say, before you go, could you talk about the drones? And then I was like, this is off topic. We're not supposed to talk about Michelle and I are going to talk about that later. But I was just like, oh my God, I have to ask Mike what he thinks about the drones. So
yeah, I mean, 90% of me is leaning toward it's some sort of government testing, and for whatever reason they don't want to say we're doing some testing. You could just pretty much wipe this all away if you just come out and say that. You don't have to say specifically what it is you're testing, but like the idea, some of the ideas out there, like it's a bomb and some sort of stuff like that. It's like, well, if it was a bomb or nuclear material that had gotten smuggled in, I mean, this has been going on for almost a month. It wouldn't be, it would be other, somewhere else by now, but also they wouldn't just be looking for it at night. It would be like 24/7. They'd be looking for it. They'd be, deploying a task force to this. They'd have bomb sniffing dogs out there. So I don't think it's that. So I think some of these ideas are scare tactics, like Project Bluebeam. Well, okay, it's not an alien invasion. Nobody's attacking. So,
Right.
I don't think we have any reason to be scared about it. I think it's the government doing some testing. But here's the one thing, the other 10% that I leave out there, because some of these images, that have even been taken by like the news crews and things like this, aren't really of drones, but they're of like giant balls of light.
Yeah.
And so
yeah.
So this gets a bit into my research in my book, Portals to the Stars, where I believe that we have a lot of reports when it comes to UAPs, UFOs, things like Sasquatch or other beings and entities, where there's like flashes of light or giant balls of light and these sorts of things. And actually, Interstellar does a great job of this, where with their wormhole to take them from one spot in the cosmos, our solar system, to another, it's a sphere. That is what a wormhole would look like in space, not a circle with a tunnel, but a sphere that would tunnel you through to some other place. So is that what we're seeing here with some of these giant balls of light? Are these the actual portals that they are using to come into our plane of existence?
They look like plasma. And you brought up like Bigfoot and interdimensional beings, and a lot of people are, thinking that they come through like with plasma or some, I don't know, something like that, because it seems to be malleable and something that could kind of, I don't know.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm in Eugene, Oregon right now at my friend's house, and she had just sent me an article where just a couple of days ago, a pilot, he was flying 7,000 feet up, and he saw something that looked like a plasma ball and has pictures of it. And I was like, yeah, it doesn't look like a drone. It's some kind of glowing ball in the sky. And there were two pilots who saw it at the same time just a few days ago. But you know what? I just looked up this morning regulations, FAA regulations for drones. And if you're flying a drone that's like any bigger than just like a toy size one, I think it's like bigger than 40 pounds, you have to have a license, and you have to have like a device on it where you could be tracked by the FAA and law enforcement. I forget the name of it, but it puts out a signal just like airplanes do. And you're legally supposed to have that. And then there's apps, including for the law enforcement and also just regular people, where you can track drones through that. So it's just odd that these law enforcement and mayors and governors are saying they don't know what it is. I mean, obviously these are not they're not legally registered, or law enforcement didn't know what they were.
Yeah, and some of the unusual things about this, and I have a drone, and I have it registered with the FAA, and it's a smaller one, but still I have my FAA ID number and everything. They can't be picked up by radar. But also, when you communicate with the drone to give it its instructions and fly it around and all that, that's a radio signal. And these are not emitting any sort of known radio signal to be able to communicate with the remote device that should be controlling it. So yeah, that's another unusual aspect of this. But there was somebody out there, some podcaster, and he's a amateur drone pilot, where he actually sent his drone up to go chase one for a few minutes, and apparently the drone flew into some sort of restricted airspace, and this guy went chasing after it. And when he got into the restricted airspace with his fully charged drone, he'd only had it up there a couple minutes, and all of a sudden went down into its shutdown procedure, and that other drone that he was chasing kept flying right through the restricted area.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. But
on a future show, we're going to be talking about our remote viewing sessions of these drones, and that actually goes along with something I said, but we have to wait for another show, so we're polite to our next guest that's coming in. But thank you so much for sharing that, Mike. Yeah, and it'll be great. If people want to check out your show tomorrow, is it going to be live or pre-recorded?
Yeah, that'll be live. That's on my YouTube channel. So, youtube.com/@mricksecker. But you can find the links to that on my website, mikericksecker.com, or through my social media, because I'll be posting about that.
Yeah, all your links will be in the description on the YouTube. And everyone, just support the romantic guy. Support love. It's so great.
He's got a pink light in the background.
Yeah, there you go. The pink
it's
light.
All good. So, well, thank you, Mike. Take care.
Thank you both very much.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Take care.
Bye. Thanks. And and Carl, hi Carl. Yeah, Carl's in the chat room, and he said it was a remote ID, and bypassing the geofencing in terms of what's happening with the drones there. So thanks, Carl. And yeah, wasn't he terrific, Michelle?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I didn't really doubt. I mean, he's amazing. He's fantastic. So, yes.
Yeah, and now we're going to have Jessica come on for a little bit. And is Jessica in the waiting room?
Yeah, Mr. Adams said that. Does she not have video, or do you see her?
I don't see her. I don't see her.
I think she's unmuted, or no, she's muted.
Okay, so it's like audio only. Is that what we're doing?
Or she should be able to join us through camera.
It seems like her video and her audio is muted.
Oh, so okay, so we will see if she, Jessica, if you could hear us, maybe is she gonna maybe need to sign off and then sign back on and give permission to use her camera and mic?
Maybe.
Yeah. So that might help, Jessica, if you can hear us. And
why don't you do?
Looks like she's reconnecting.
Okay,
cool.
Why don't you give like a little intro to your research, like set the stage.
Yeah. Well, let's say about Jessica. Jessica, I've known her for a while. She is really so eclectic, and she takes so many classes and studies so many things. She was one of my clairvoyant students for a while, but then she was practicing hypnotherapy, and she did some really incredible sessions with me. And then she also, by her day job, is a professional transcriptionist for attorneys and court cases. There she is. And she's also a longtime yoga practitioner, and she's one of my travel buddies. So we've been going to fun places. We're in contact in the desert, and went through Death Valley and to New Mexico recently. And she's just so smart. She also went with John Knowles and I to Rice University, where we were studying the Ingo Swann archives.
I
Or
mean,
not
I
the
was sick the whole
Stargate
time.
archives.
I was there too.
You were there too, but you were sick, so I
The
forget that
whole
you
time.
were there.
I
Yeah,
was
you
sick.
didn't
And-
really get to hang
And
out.
don't misunderstand this cute little Jessica here. She's a troublemaker. Just saying.
She is a big troublemaker.
She's a
Like, you
big
guys have to look out for her. She is very dangerous and mysterious.
And mysterious for sure.
Mhm.
Is that a real background behind you?
It is.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's really cool.
So I'm at my mom's, and actually this room that I'm in was a little chapel, and I've kind of turned it into an office.
Oh my gosh,
Ooh.
that is so cool. I love
Yeah,
those
so-
windows.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all the books you write, you can put in there, and you
I
fill it
better
up.
start now if I'm going to write all those books that you're talking
I
about.
know all the books, every single one of
You better
them.
get busy. Right this second. All right. Well, I wanted to have you come on, Jessica, because you and I have been doing a lot of reading with these case studies that we were assigned by Dr. Horan, who is with the Society for Scientific Exploration and the editor of the JSC. And he had this great idea to take a few time travel cases, like ones that are considered to be some of the best, and to really try to study these in a systematic manner. Because, so often, like, we hear about stories and they're all interesting and everything, and I think that our last guest said it well, like, sometimes people will have a photograph and of in the 1920s, and they're wearing shoes, Nikes that they didn't have back then, or things like that. But, we don't see the Nike symbol. It just kind of looks like modern shoes. But there's hundreds of examples of like that, thousands. But then it's like, well, what really, how good is this evidence, and what do we do with all of this evidence? Because there's just, there's so many different explanations for these things. So Dr. Horan came up with the idea that we do a systematic analysis on some cases, but then he was like, well, what's the best way to analyze this? And I think he also wanted to like demonstrate that different types of ways of analyzing data could produce different types of results too. So his study isn't complete. Our portion of it is complete. And what he did was he contacted different researchers and he said, will you focus on a particular theory of the time travel cases and then design a way to analyze the data from that theory? So he assigned, for myself and Jessica, the theory was remote viewing, since we're so familiar with remote viewing. So that was like our overarching theory. And then he wanted us to see if that could be like partially what's going on with these time travel cases. And so, Jessica, I thought maybe what we could do was have you give a synopsis of, like, let's start with the first case, the case that was very widely publicized on Art Bell, the Art Bell show, starting in the early 2000s. Did it go from like 2000 to 2001, I think, were the dates on that one?
I can't remember when it finished, but it was kind of a short chunk, and a lot of the accounts started in 2000, but then it turned out that he had actually made some appearances in 1998, and this guy's name was John Titor. He's everywhere, all over the internet still. So, and there are people that still believe that he comes back every so often. So it just depends on if you're a believer or not as to whether he comes back. So he was just posting on all these sites before there was really the internet. So when you have the like the big DOS machines, I can't remember the name of the computer, was some kind of IBM machine, 5100 or 1500 or something like that. that he said he was gonna use for the time machine, or he needed that. Actually, I'm getting my time machines mixed up. So
Well, that's okay. I do see
yeah,
that it was the online forums and message boards
yes,
that took place between 98 and 2001.
something
And
like this. Yeah,
so it was the early chat boards, and he
yeah,
would appear and he would basically say, "Hi, everyone, I'm a time traveler." And then people would converse with him. And
right.
some people seemed to believe him, some people did not believe him, but he made many. I don't think you'd. Well, would you call them predictions? Do you feel like because he would talk about what happens in the future, and it kind of felt like predictions, just because he says this will happen, but it's not happened yet.
Well,
Jessica,
according to him, he was talking about them as they had already happened. So he was talking about them as they were in the past, but we would take it more as a prediction. But most of them, probably all of them, didn't happen. There was supposed to be a world war in 2015, didn't happen. He did talk about CERN, though, that they were going to have some major developments with CERN, the Hadron Collider. But he didn't give a timeline for when. He just said for within the next year. And this was maybe in 2000 when he said that. So I'm not
yeah,
sure if we've had big developments other than having them find the, what is it, the Higgs boson or Higgs boson
Boson.
Higgs
Yeah.
boson particle. Yeah,
2012, July 2012.
which I found that interesting in 2012, since that's when the Mayan calendar ended at the end of that year. So I
Yeah.
thought that was kind of strange. And then they were shut down for about 3 years through COVID. They shut down in 2018 and then came back online in 2022, maybe. But I haven't really followed that.
now, do you remember when he would go on Art Bell? He did it with his voice, right? Like everyone could hear him talk. Do you remember, or was
I
it
don't
like
remember that, but I know he sent some faxes in, maybe one or two faxes that Art Bell read online.
Yeah, this was really big. Like Art would talk about him a lot. And yeah, I'm just reading over our notes to see if he actually did, like, if they heard his voice. But he did, at a couple points, he provided a couple pictures of his time machine. It
Mhm.
looked a little bit hokey. But the thing was, so many people believed him and so many people were convinced. And maybe we could talk about. Oh, let's see. Our producer said Art Bell discussed the Higgs boson discovery in an episode. Okay, he's just showing that Art had talked about that.
We
Okay,
should have Dr. Kaku on our show.
that
I wonder if I can get him to come.
that would be really cool. Well, what I want to say here is, because I have our assessment up, and basically what we did, like what we found was, before we could even start to like try to give theories about what was going on, like we did have data based on his statements of what would come to pass. So we did an analysis where we actually took all of his statements, put them into a spreadsheet of what was going to happen, and then we rated them. Did they happen or not? And I'll just like read a few here. He said that China would retake Taiwan. Now he said this was in a particular time frame. So some of these things could have maybe not passed yet, but he did give time frames that have since passed, right? But do you remember the time frames he was talking about? That they've all been up until now, I think.
So I do remember the 2015 where there was a war. And I think by 2025, the United States was supposed to break up into different, chunks and be on their own, kind of, what's the word, seceding from the United States. So that obviously hasn't happened.
Yeah. Yeah. So here, I just found it. In 2015, Russia launches a nuclear strike against the major cities in the United States, which is like a civil war. That didn't happen. There's a nuclear war in 2015. It's not that bad. The bombs are much cleaner. No, that didn't happen. Russia's covered in nuclear snow from their collapsed reactors. No. He talked about year 2000, Y2K is a disaster. And maybe that's also why like there was such hype. I think that contributed at that time, both there were so many guests on our belt coming up talking about Y2K, and this guy did too. And as we know, that was pretty much a flop. So basically, he said, as a result of many conflicts, there will be no Olympics in 2004. This is just a sampling, but out of basically, let's see, how many statements were there? Oh gosh, I'm trying to read this really quick. It was something like out of 99, I don't remember the number. It was something like there were like 25 statements or 35 statements he made about the future. Out of the total, only one was correct. It was like 99% of what he said did not come to pass. So
Right.
based on that, I know I felt that like we just have to throw this out. Like this is just, there's no evidence whatsoever that this guy was a time traveler. And Jessica, did you basically come to that conclusion as well?
I did. I mean, he sounded knowledgeable when he was talking about all the sciencey stuff, but there was a website that I came across recently, and it says that, let's see. So long story short, the evidence points to John Titor having been a neat experiment put together by a group of creative folks, possibly including John Rick Haber or Joseph Matheny. However, unless the key creators someday come forward, there'll probably always be a lingering what if. So Pamela Moore was the woman that he contacted a lot, supposedly. She thinks, let's see. She thinks it's bizarre that not one single person remembered the faxes in 2001, back when Titor was posting online, and she questions why the faxes magically just appeared in the timeline. So she seemed to have information about Titor that, let me find you again. Where are you? Oh, she seemed to have information about Titor that other people didn't have about him, and I think she might have been related to the people that they thought were doing this hoax as John Titor. So I don't think it held up to scrutiny at all.
Yeah, I found what we wrote for our results, and we said we analyzed a total of 76 unique statements taken from 393 written pages of transcripts. That was a lot of work too. I know, Jessica, you went through 393 pages and highlighted any statement that could be considered a factual statement. And then between the two of us, we had like separate raters to judge these, and there were no discrepancies between the raters. Out of 76 statements, 98.68 were rated as incorrect. So that's basically 99% incorrect. And I know that people get so excited about these things. It's fun to think that you're communicating with a time traveler. And I know I feel like kind of like a Debbie Downer, being like, no, this was I never want to have to say anything is, not true, but, we have to do that because when the time comes when something is true and amazing, if we don't think critically about these things, then it's just going to water down when something really is happening that's valid.
Well, I think so too, but I think time travel is a circular conversation though. So when he was dealing with people that didn't believe him, that were attacking him, he would say things like when he came back in time or forward in time, he ended up in a different timeline. So things would be changing as he was traveling back or forward. So you couldn't really pinpoint exactly what was happening because you were in a different timeline at that point. So that was, I found that was interesting, but how can you ever prove anything? So who knows?
Yeah, if you go with that line of thinking.
Right.
Well, let's.
Can I say, so when I was working with Art Bell, and Heather Wade was filling in for Art, and she asked me if I could find this guy, because he was missing for all this time, whatever. And she's like, yeah, can you see if you can find him and, ask around. So she gave me a couple leads to start chasing down and stuff. And all we got was like something about, a lot of truckers would listen to the show. Also there's another guy, Mel's Hole, if you guys remember Mel's Hole. And so I think they keep they have like, what is it, like truckers secret society or something. So evidently they were like, they knew who this was, but I could not kind of get more information on both of those people. And I've tried, and several people have written to me and said, oh, I found him, but I don't think I think it's a hoax for sure. So just wanted to add my 2 cents into that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So we have one more case and just a few minutes to go over it, but this was really interesting too. Do you want to talk about the vertical plane and just give us a summary, Jessica?
So the vertical plane is where I got confused with the computers because they both kind of deal with an old computer. So yes, this one happened in the UK, and this guy Ken and his girlfriend Debbie, coincidentally Debbie, were living in this apartment or a flat. I don't know how they described it, but they were getting messages on this computer from this person in the past who would speak Old English. But then they were also getting messages from something that called themselves 2109 from the future. So it first started out with talking with people in the past, or with this person in the past. So where it got kind of sketchy, though, it wasn't just time travel, it was poltergeist things too. So they would be talking with this guy. He said his name was Lucas, and it turned out his name was Thomas. But the poltergeisty things in the house, the furniture would be rearranged. There would be footprints, 6 toes, footprints up the wall kind of things. So there was just a lot going on there. So I'm not sure it was time travel. I think it might have been more of an entity or something else.
Well, now, if it's possible that like items were getting moved because maybe someone in the past moved them. I mean, there would be like cans. It wasn't like things would just spontaneously show up. They were already there items like cans of food that would be there, but then they'd come home and they'd be stacked like really high up, or like furniture stacked on other furniture. And that was pretty mysterious. And we should say too that the computer, now this was in he wrote a book called The Vertical Plane and The Mystery of the Dawdleson Messages. And this book was written in 1989. So from 1984 to 1986, approximately 300 messages appeared on computers. And we should point out that these computers, the Lucas, let's see, the person who wrote The Vertical Plane, what was his name? Ken Webster. He worked at an elementary school or high school. And this was like in the days of the very earliest version of personal computers. But he didn't have his own computer. He would get a computer from school, bring it home for a while. And this happened across multiple computers that he brought home. And and they checked it out. They had like a number of people, look through the computer, and it wasn't like it was, running programs or anything. And it would interact, like it would give a message and then he would type something back and then it would respond again. Now, if this happened today, it would just be like, oh, it's AI, right? But they didn't have that in the early mid 1980s. So this was a really mysterious case. And they did have the researchers from the Society of Psychical Research in the UK come and investigate. But Jessica, do you remember what their findings were?
Well, there were a couple of researchers that came, and they were pretty secretive when they came to figure out if this was actually happening or not, or if it was somebody pulling a prank or a hoax. They would write messages in a letter, a closed letter, put it next to the machine, and they would get a reply that Ken was supposed to just print it or something and put it in a letter, not read it, and give it to them, something like that. And then they would take that back, and this went on for a little while, but then they said there was nothing, there was nothing going on here. They pretty much said it was a hoax. But when Ken, I think, went to the psychical research facility to ask about that, to talk to the two men, one, they said, had never been there, and the other one was gone, like he had quit and left. So there was no recourse there. So, but the findings, they said there were no findings. They just kind of discounted the whole thing, but then they were gone. So I found that a little bit sketchy.
Well, the thing was that they really wanted something to happen on the computer when they were there, and they kept the family out of the house.
Mhm.
So basically, like they said, you guys go to a restaurant, get out of here for a while. We're going to stay in the house, and we're going to see if this happens while we're here, which sounds like a valid way of studying this, except, just like so much other research, it's now changing some of the major components of how this usually happens. So, why, like, should we assume that the same phenomenon is going to happen if different people are in the house? So, they didn't find them faking anything. They just didn't observe anything happening, as far as I can remember. But in our final assessment, we said that Ken Webster's presentation of the communication sequence of events and personal experience, juxtaposed with continued findings from our own Peters and the SPR's investigation, seems quite balanced. We really found that there were contradictory assessments of the authenticity of the Old English used in hundreds of messages. So at face value, that was another thing, is that these messages came in very Old English. And one linguistics expert said, yeah, that's from hundreds of years ago, that like almost nobody speaks anymore. Another expert came in and said, well, that wasn't really how they spoke even, during that particular era. So, and one person swore up and down that it was very authentic, and it would be very hard to, if the author of the book was trying, Ken Webster and Debbie Oakes, it would be very hard for them to replicate this language. So there were contradicting expert testimony to that. So really, our conclusion was, our findings were basically that this was a mystery, and it's going to remain a mystery because, we felt that the witnesses were the two people who this was happening to. They had friends who were, one who was a historical scholar who studied this with them and experienced some of this with them. So there was, ongoing witnesses to this and so the witnesses were very reliable. It was just from like an outside perspective, just, hard to say what was going on here.
Well,
But
interesting too, that so I think what put a spin on it for me was the poltergeist stuff and 2109. That just seemed out of left field. If they hadn't come into the picture, it seemed like it would have been a little bit, we could have wrapped it in a little bit of a package better. But the 2109, when they came in, they also actually wanted Ken to connect with a ufologist. Do you remember that part?
Yeah. So explain a little bit more. So 2901 was like
The
supposed
109.
it was coming in like suddenly messages were being written that were different. They were different. They weren't in Old English, and they were insulting, and they were like threatening and scary. And those started to come in. And yeah, so they what did they say exactly about the UFO stuff?
Well, they were kind of pitting the guy from the past, Lucas/Thomas, against Ken and Debbie, sort of trying to get them to mistrust each other. And they just gave Ken and Debbie the name of a ufologist, and I can't remember his name right now. It's Gary something maybe, just to get in touch with him. I think maybe to validate their existence or something like that. So the ufologist did come in and communicate with whoever, and then he ended up leaving as well, and then not having any communication with them, but then popping up later saying that, yeah, it was all true and that he's a total believer. So
Yeah, and that was, and we should say here, this was before the days of the internet, but it was in the mid to late 80s. So actually the internet would have been like in early development, but these computers were not supposedly like hooked up to the internet. This was not like coming through like, a early chat or anything. So that was what made it really mysterious. And the guy from the past, supposedly from the past, like it was almost like he talked as if he could see what they were doing in their house. And like he would say he was like looking through the fireplace and he could see them walking around, and he kind of had a crush on the girlfriend. And she started having dreams of him. So it was very, and what he could see happening in the house, like did seem to be like he heard their conversations and then would comment on the conversations. So it was all very mysterious. And this went on for a number of years. And the book is really good. Again, it's called the Vertical Plane, and it's written really well. And so people might want to check that out. But just to backtrack for a second, did you feel that the fact that like now this other voice is coming in that's like nasty and talking about weird stuff and insulting, clearly not the first guy's voice from the past, did you feel that made it more believable because it wasn't a nicely wrapped up package now of what was going on, or less believable? Because I thought it made it more believable.
I thought it was
just because why throw that in there if it was a hoax or something?
exactly. Well, it was just so out of left field. And so if you think about it in terms of mediumship, you think you're communicating with one person or entity, but you're really communicating with another one who may start out to be nice, but then gets mean. So it kind of had that flavor a little bit for me. So, and as far as the time travel piece goes, Thomas did have a crush on Debbie, but there were also a couple of instances where she kind of traveled to his time and was able to be in his time with him. So I thought that was really interesting. So I just think there was a lot going in that house, and that I think they also found it to be on a ley line. So I think there were a lot of things converging there, maybe a lot of throughways.
And when we were studying this, I tried to get in touch with them to see if they would do an interview, but they said no. There's a Facebook group that's devoted to this case, and I don't know if they're involved in the Facebook group. They referred me to the Facebook group, and they said, people are talking about this, but they did not want to talk. So, Michelle.
Yeah, we need to wrap up.
Okay.
Wrap it up.
Yeah, well, Jessica, thank you for coming on. We're going to have you. You are a great. You remind me of Linda Moulton Howe, and I think we should make you the Side Chicks investigator, and we can have you investigate different things and come on and talk about them. Why don't we hire you right now on the spot to do that?
Yeah, the side chicks investigator reporter.
Yes.
Well, that sounds really fun. I'll take it.
Just joining the side chicks family.
Thanks.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
And then let's just see, is there anything in the chat that we should address? Gives anyone a chance to say anything before we wrap up. I know we just have a few more minutes, but we really appreciate the people joining us tonight. And Bridget's here. Bridget says, hi, Jessica.
Hi, Bridget.
And Carl's here, and Mike is here, and Edith and Joe.
You sound like Romper Room.
I know, and all our friends. Pat McDonald. Pat's here. Hi there.
I just want to say to everyone, if you really like the show, please tell your friends to come. The chat goes crazy, and I think one of our missions is to create a small community around the side chicks and talking about all these kind of cool subjects. We have a whole bunch of very interesting things coming up. We are planning a panel of amazing people. It's going to be a fun time on New Year's Eve. So if you don't have any plans and you want to just join us for New Year's Eve, we're going to make it very interactive. We're going to make some predictions for 2025, which is always a lot of fun. And then we'll have a panel of guests. So we'll get so many different personalities and things like that. So there's
going to be more fireworks here than there are on any other show. So, and I don't know if we're going to be on it at midnight. What do you think? Well, we have different midnight.
Yeah, we have different time zones. But
that would be kind of fun, though, wouldn't it, to do a countdown together?
Yeah. Are you going to kiss me at midnight?
Well, we could all kiss each other. We'll do a group kiss. But we have to figure out the time zone.
Yeah, we'll figure it out, and then we'll put it in our social media so that everybody can follow along with everything. But all the links for our guests are in the description on YouTube. Please make sure that you're all subscribing and telling your friends about it, and all that fun stuff. And and thank you, Jessica. We'll definitely have to incorporate some projects for you. So I want to say,
and you know what? Wait. Before you say bye, so for our next show, like everyone should bring like their favorite drink, like champagne, and we should let's have like a funny hat contest or something.
All right, we'll
wear a funny hat.
We'll put it in the social media.
Okay.
So, okay. All right, everyone. Bye. Have a great week. Merry Christmas.
Bye. Thank you.